Hello, green industry friends. I'm Kelly Schmidt, Executive Director of the Illinois Green Industry Association. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Biocontrol is your first line of defense in integrated pest management. We are bringing you this topic today as a follow-up to the pest management workshop we held last March at the College of DuPage. Some of you were able to attend that and expressed that this is a topic that you'd like to learn more about. So today we have two people to speak to you about their experience with biological controls. Rachel Sporer is with BioBest Sustainable Crop Management. She graduated from Iowa State University with a horticulture degree and actively uses biological controls in her own gardens. Rachel works with ornamentals, fruit, and cannabis growers across the Midwest, helping them to integrate biological controls into their IPMs. We're also excited to have Marty Bartz join us. He is the horticulture lab technician and head grower at College of DuPage. Marty has been using biological controls for the spring annuals and perennials, hydroponic crops, foliage, and poinsettias at the COD growing facilities for 4 years now. He is regularly presented with the opportunity to demonstrate the benefits of BIOS to COD horticulture students and members of the community who tour the greenhouse. We are thankful he is willing to share his experience with us today. For all of our participants, you have all been muted to ensure that everyone can hear our presenters. If you have a question, you can type it into the chat box at any time. We'll ask our speakers to address those questions at 2 points in the presentation, halfway through, and again at the end. This is being recorded, and we'll send a link to everyone who registered. Now, I will turn it over to Rachel Sporer.
Every single detail today. So for example, whitefly, mealybug, fungus gnat, some of you might experience those and they're not in the presentation today, but we are happy to do follow-up workshops or talk to you individually. So let us know about that. And then at the end, we will have some time to get into some questions that everyone may have. So first off, how do biocontrols fit into integrated pest management? So most of you are probably doing things in each of these categories in one way or another. And today we're going to talk specifically about this middle group. Biological solutions are defined as controlling pests using other organisms. And here are some definitions that we use and some terms that you might hear. When we say beneficial insects, it's the predatory mites, other insects, predatory wasps, parasitic wasps, nematodes, and all the other things we're going to talk about there. The second row of biochemicals are applied usually similarly to conventional chemicals, like in a spray or a dip or a drench, but they're made from beneficial fungi, bacteria, viruses. And then the bottom row there is pheromones, which is usually used in conjunction with mass trapping, so just big rolls of sticky tape, and pheromones that attract pest insects. And then why use biocontrols? There are usually a few reasons that all combine together, and I know Marty will have some things to say about what brought him to use biocontrols at the College of DuPage. So starting with the fact that bios find pests before the damage occurs. So you're starting off while the plants are healthy, and you're not waiting until you have damage occurring in the crop. The bugs are able to find the pests before even the best scouts can see them, because they're so small. We can't look at every single plant, but having tiny little army of beneficial bugs out there can do that work for you. And Marty, I know, has some things to share about that.
Preventative is definitely the way to go, as we know traditionally with how we've taken care of pests with other methods of, chemical sprays or drenches or sprenches with the tools that we have out there. But getting into bios, it's even more important. Like Rachel said, try getting a spray droplet small enough to get into the little leaf axils or underneath the leaves, whereas these can be spread preventatively generally just set in the crop or over the top of the crop, not needing to get a full coverage. So again, these little mites and wasps that can find these bugs before even a human scout could is very important. And you're really not reinventing the wheel with implementing this program, because you already have records of what you sprayed. You already know when you're going to get that pest pressure, and when you're going to be preventative with your other tools that you had. So why not incorporate some of the biological into your toolbox? And you're kind of following, you're going to get your aphids coming in a greenhouse March, April. You're going to get your spider mites happening, late summer into fall. And you already probably have a lot of those records, so you can really work with what you have and industry pros and some of your supplier reps to really get a hold on making the preventative measures. We all know one thrip, couple aphids, how fast they can reproduce. So it's very important. We even at the college, and I know of other growers that will treat their liners and their cuttings that come in prior to transplanting. And again, one thrip turns into thousands very quickly. One aphid, they're born pregnant. So it's very important. And again, sprays may not be able to get into the entire plant. You have to cover all surfaces. You have to get it on the insect most of the time. And even the systemics that you might be sprenching or drenching with or spraying on the foliage, that may not get to the target pest or may not get into the plant exactly where you need it.
Yes, exactly. And because of that, and because it catches those things so early on, it's great for all levels of consumers. So even you as the grower are a consumer of whoever started the plant for you. If you are sending plants to another grower to finish, that grower is a customer of yours. And by using beneficial insects, we're preventing resistance that can cause issues for your customers or for you down the line. Not only that, but the general public of consumers are becoming a lot more aware of what's going on in sustainability and how the way that things are grown can affect, when they take them home and put them in their garden, or, for herb or vegetable growers, when they put them in their food. So I know at the College of DuPage, you have a lot of people entering that might be asking questions, and I think that a lot of garden centers deal with that as well.
Correct. We do have sales at College of DuPage to try to raise money for our program. So more or less, there's a retail setting that we have. So many people come through our greenhouse, which our spring annual crop is where we tend to use a lot of these biologicals. And that's also when we have a lot of classes going on, because it's great for the students to view all the plants at that time. It's also when we have our big spring sale, annuals, perennials, succulents, veggies, and other edible crops. So with everybody coming through with tours going on, that's most popular time for the community to come through with tours, anywhere from kindergarten and Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, to senior groups and garden centers. So there's always somebody coming through our greenhouse. We might even have night classes. And we really want to make sure that that window of application is there, and that helps with that. So as far as customers go, we know that especially some of the younger customers coming in their 20s and 30s, they're purchasing plants. It's getting more popular for indoor plants, and they're the ones buying the houses, and they're the ones that want their landscaping done. And where are they getting those plants from? They're asking questions. They're coming in. There's the buzzwords that we all know in the industry: organic, non-GMO, pesticides. They're using them. There's going to be these questions coming up, and I've seen it firsthand in our greenhouse. We've had a customer come in from the community, ask about what we were doing to prevent pests, and I said some of the products that we used, and she basically walked right out and refused to purchase from us. So they're really looking for this new trend and technology that's allowing us to use more biocontrols and mostly less application of the other chemicals. So even if you're not completely bio and you're not using anything, at least we're reducing our number of sprays. And I think that's important, especially on the retail end. But whether you're doing wholesale or retail growing, your end is your customer. And you might be doing commercial plantings, or you might be having a plant on the shelf in a garden center eventually, and maybe those thresholds might be a little different. And you've seen it on the lawn care business, plant healthcare businesses. You look on the trucks and there's a dog, or there's a child running through the grass, and that's where the trends are for the industry, for the consumers. And no matter what, I think they're excited to appreciate a reduction of traditional chemical sprays, and talking about good bugs might even excite them. When I show tours coming through, when I show the students, I show the community, some of our customers coming in for the sales, and I really show them what's happening. I show them some of our products that they can see how we're applying them in sachets and whatnot, and they get excited. They probably tell other people, their kids get excited about it. And I think it's just going to keep going from there, with educating more on this trend and technology that we have.
Yeah, and all of that really comes down to having healthier plants and people. So Marty touched on a few of these things, and people are looking for healthier lifestyles, and that's not just the public consumer, but employees. So one way to create a workplace that people want to work at is by using less chemicals, requiring people to put on those respirators less. And no one wants to put on a Tyvek suit and walk around when it's 80 degrees outside. And so your employees are going to be a lot happier. And then, the plants are even healthier, because insects don't have phytotoxicity. They don't shut down the plant activity in the way that some of the high pressure sprays can. They don't, if you're fogging, like in a greenhouse or a high tunnel, you're really creating a humid environment overnight, and that does not happen when you apply beneficial insects. So you have a healthier supply system overall, from the people to the product. So the most important thing is to be strategic, which Marty has already touched on, how you're already doing this with your conventional integrated pest management and your sprays, your hygiene practices, and everything else. So it's just translating what you already know into these four main parts that can help you set up a biological program. So the first step is the monitoring and reporting. Again, you already have spray records, so you already know when you tend to see pests crop up as a hotspot. So it's using those records and that knowledge to implement preventative insects. Even if we know we always have a hotspot, this time without fail, we can put some curative application out the week that we would normally do a heavy spray. We will touch on scouting a lot more in a future slide, but sticky traps and lures are a great way to get some of those records, and it's just getting easier and easier to record those things, like in an Excel file, or most suppliers have scouting apps now, and that's something that is very important to do weekly. And I know at the College of DuPage, that's a part of your classes and your employees every day or every week practices.
Correct. Yeah, we actually implement mainly our student workers that we hire who are kind of directly under our wing in all of our lab areas and trying to get some hands-on direct learning with what's going on, especially in the greenhouse. So they are able to scout using sticky cards and the hand lenses and really get down and see what's going on with the plant, so we know what we're targeting, so we know what pest pressure we have, to whether we can continue with a preventative application or if we need to go into the more curative application. And I kind of like to, along with monitoring and recording, it's easy to walk through the greenhouse. We look at our flag plants, what's drying out. We notice damage once it's already occurred. And we can notice certain things that we're used to just walking through. But if you're really getting up and close with the plants, I like to think of it like most people hate weeding in the garden and whatnot. I love it because I'm getting down in, I'm looking at the plants, I'm seeing what's happening with everything. You're getting a really close up view of what's going on so you can prevent things in the future. I think it's going to save time and money. People think there might be more monitoring and recording that goes along with the biocontrol program. And I think there is, and there should be, and that way, like, you're saving money and time in the future by doing this and really seeing what you have at the plant level.
Yeah, and that allows you to take the early and preventative action that you really need. So when you know what's going on in your crop, you know when something changes and you can get something out there right away. When plants come in, they can have issues on them already. So that's when a dip comes in. And we're going to touch more on that in the next slide. But using bios early as your first line of defense, you're not waiting until the pest arrives. You're using your past records to address the pests before they really get there. And that way there's something ready to eat them or parasitize them right if they arrive. And that leads into creating an ecosystem approach. So with sprays especially, it takes something different to address each different pest. And it is that way in bios, but there's also a lot of overlap. So, similarly, as you sit down and you think of what spray you're going to use for your life stage or your pest, you can do that with biologicals and have multiple predators and parasites out in your greenhouse at one time looking for different pests at the same time. So you're not saying, okay, we're going to control our thrip with biologicals, but we're going to control our spider mite with chemicals. Your chemical program is going to then throw off your biologicals. So you really have to just think of it as a whole ecosystem, and that is across the board and allows you to focus on your crops in that way as well. And then what brings it all together is really the team involvement. So you can really get your employees more excited about IPM when they're looking for these parasitization rates, or you can teach them to see the difference between a spider mite egg and a beneficial mite egg, and it's easier than you think. And that's where the technical team from your supplier comes in to help you learn those things. And so you can really get people involved when you appoint your really consistent employees. You want the same people to scout every week so they know, or the same few people, so they know what the crop looks like and they know how to notice when something changes. And then you can establish a really clear communication among those people, and that way you're all on the same page. So one person doesn't think that you have an insane, incurable pest outbreak, while someone else thinks, no, we can get that under control with maybe a cleanup biochemical spray or even a curative release of bio. So you want to get your communication on the right line, and we're going to get into that in a couple slides as well.
Yeah, and I think that's important, just everyone getting on the same page. And as far as the team goes, they have to know what's different about some of these release structures that are out there and what to do with them, and getting them trained. Maybe they're the group that you use as your IPM scouts before, or maybe they're your spray techs that are certified. And the nice thing is they don't even, what they're applying, they don't have to be licensed in a lot of situations. So you can even utilize some other employees for release of some of these, and stick with the team that's really knowledgeable in doing all the ID and whatnot. And if you think about your timing on most applications, 7 to 21 days on your interval for a lot of this traditional spraying, whether it's preventative or curative. So the time it takes to monitor with the team and record and kind of use these 4 aspects Rachel talked about, maybe that time that they're using to really get down and see what's happening, like I said, might save you more time, because you're then having to do less of just, well, it's 14 days later, I better do another application, whether it needs it or not, or whether I know where the hot spots are or not. So that time using that and with your entire team could potentially save in the future.
Totally. Yeah, we see that all the time. And so yeah, how to get started then, and bring all of that strategy and make it your own, and each grower will do this themselves. So we can do all of the overview presentations in the world, but really it depends on grower to grower and farm to farm, greenhouse to greenhouse. So first you review what you've done in the past. Again, we will look at your pesticide use, like we said, to see what pests you have in hot spots at different times, but also to identify what success means for you. So when you're trying something new, we try to take the scientific approach, and before we try, we say, okay, how are we going to know if this goes well? So if usually during a crop, you spray it every 7 to 14 days, and you end up spraying it 8 to 12 times over the crop cycle, maybe success for you means we don't spray until the last 3 weeks before shipping. So, maybe you're always going to spray this crop. Maybe it's a poinsettia, for example, that needs to be completely free of everything so it can sit on someone's dinner table at Christmas. Maybe you're always going to spray that crop to clean it up before you ship it out. But you say, if we can reduce our sprays from 12 to 9, then that's success for us in the first year. And then as we keep going, maybe we can reduce that to 1 biochemical spray or something like that. But either way, you can look back on your records and use your experience to determine that individually. The next step before you get started and order your first bios is choosing your application method. And we will get into that more in a couple of slides. It depends on the item and how the crop is, and it's something that can be tailored to each individual person. And then using all of that information, you can start clean by dipping or sprenching your plugs and transplants as they arrive. This is done with biological solutions like Botanigard, some strain of beneficial, something for disease prevention like a trichoderma strain, nematodes, and maybe even a insecticidal soap if you're not using the nematodes. So it's all things that are friendly with bios. That way you're getting rid of whatever may have come in on the crop, and that allows you to do that early application of bios because the re-entry is low on those biochemicals, so then you can get your beneficial insects out right away. And I know those dips are something that Marty has implemented at College of DuPage.
Yes, we gathered a kind of a tonic through some other industry professionals and the recommendations of some of the conferences we've attended and a lot of the data out there for, what effect do you get when you're getting in unrooted cuttings or rooted cuttings, liners and things like that. So we do use a root shield and the Botanigard type dip, so we can mix those. They're compatible together. They need to be agitated, and we're putting them in a container where we can actually dip the entire tray, the soil, the roots, as well as the cutting. So we're covering every part of that plant, including the tray that it's coming in. And the research has showed that there's usually at least a couple thrip coming in on each tray, I would say. And as far as root-borne diseases, you can use the root shield for that. And we found a lot of success in that because, the research shows that, like I said before, 1 or 2 thrip on each plug, or even just a couple on that tray. Well, your plug tray's sitting around for a while, they're spreading, then you get them transplanted, you get them out, and maybe you haven't done any treatment yet. Well, by then you could be up into like the hundreds depending on what life stage they're at. So this really helps you start clean. We've seen a huge decrease in our thrip damage, especially early on in the crop. When some of the things may not be as active, like in February, March, and things like that, we're knocking them down. And then we're already have introduced some of our biologicals, and it's been a really good preventative measure to reduce our overall product. And I've even seen, sorry, Rachel, I've even seen.
No, you go ahead.
I've seen a tonic with mineral oil used, and that was a recipe that I did see at a conference. And those 2 products mixed with like a mineral oil or any other horticulture type oil does work well. I have seen a little more sensitivity with using the mineral oil from my experience on certain crops. So just like anything, you have to try different things, and you may have a little bit of sensitivity with these specific products. If you're using a Botanigard with, an oil-based as opposed to a wettable powder or something like that, you may have differences too. So, but definitely a lot of success with our crop using that method.
Yeah, we're hearing that across the board. And again, there's a ton of different tonics out there that you can mix together. And the main thing is it's really a great time to be able to apply your bios early on while they're still in the trays, because then you're just covering a smaller square footage and getting them out there early so they can reproduce and move along with your crop. So after you do all that, you evaluate again, back to recording and monitoring even more. So again, we're scouting weekly. We're looking for both damage in the crop. We're looking and the different life stages of the pest. We're gonna, again, get more into that next slide. Again, sticky cards are great. And then with that evaluation, we can respond. The key to being able to respond with bios as a first line is just having that eye on it weekly, so you know that if something crops up, it's new, it's not, you have it early, and then you can do a curative release of bios, or even spray a biochemical to knock back the different life stages, and then release bios as soon as that REI is up. So you can work with a, rep at your biological company. I know BioBest has a side effects app to help you decide what you may be able to use if you have an outbreak during your biological program. But really, it's just trying different things, especially in the first few seasons. It's just responding with different things until you find what works best for you.
Yeah, and we've done that, but the first couple of years, it was a learning experience. And I think in this industry, we're always going to be learning, and that's what, is helping the industry continue to grow. And at College of DuPage, we want to make sure we're up with the technology that's available to us, so we can, refer that back to the students, because these type of things are going to be more utilized, I think, in the future. And at first we were afraid, hey, once we start doing this, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to respond if we do get an outbreak? And like Rachel said, we did have poor luck first couple seasons with poinsettia crops, and they did have to be treated before they went out. But your threshold on that is much less than a geranium or a petunia going out, where you may not need a quick response because if your threshold's a little bit high that can go out, it's going to be outside. Is it a commercial planting where it won't matter, or is it going to be something in front of a customer on a shelf? So there are mixtures of biochemicals that you can use, and there's other more traditional sprays you may be used to that are light on killing off the biologicals that you are using. So you can easily do a mixture of the things till you really get it down. And I think this whole thing shows that, what is your threshold? And if you can at least reduce the amount of spraying of what you did use before, then that may be success, at least in your first couple of years.
Yeah, and just as promised, we'll touch on the scouting quickly. So I've already stressed this. It needs to be done weekly by the same few people. That way you can catch things early on and create a trained workforce. There's tons of opportunities for continuing education in this category, free webinars. When you have an industry rep, they can come and educate your team for you. I know we can do trainings in Spanish or English or any language that you need for your workforce. And that leads us to the fact that you do need a predetermined language about how you talk about pests. That way you're all on the same page. So sometimes it's a level 1 to 3, and that means, you have the pest present with some bios present too, so you're not worried about it, is maybe a level 1, whereas a level 3 is like, we have spider mites present, we have webbing, and we don't have any bios. It's a level 3. So those are just some ways that you can get things easy to translate across worker turnover if you have it, but also across different departments, or maybe if the person that's ordering the bios is different than the person who's doing the scouting, you need ways to all be able to discuss what you need. Sticky cards are a great way to get around that. When they're counted on the same day every week, it makes for really consistent data. It's quantitative, so no matter who's counting it, it should be the same. And that can easily be recorded, like I said, using Excel or a scouting app. And as technology advances, these apps are going to be able to count these things for us even. So we have a lot to look forward to in this realm. And we're going to talk deeper about each pest, but we're looking for not only damage on the crop, but the different life stages of the pest and the bio as well. We're going to factor in the different ratios, like rates of parasitism or bio eggs versus pest eggs. So this is all stuff that people are excited to learn, because usually it means they get to spray less, but also it means they're more involved in the process. And I mean, scouts are really valuable everywhere. So people are usually very excited to be trained to scout. It's just a skill that I think takes people that have it really far in this industry. So it's fun to learn about.
Yeah, and I think, like Rachel said, I'm very excited to not have to put my Tyvek on and my respirator and walk around and wring my shirt out when I'm done, even if it's 65 and sunny or sweating up. And other employees, I think, would get a kick out of that. They really get into it. Our students get into it in the community, and I love scouting and applying and just really looking at this. And I think, from an employee that just has to spray because that's the schedule all the time, or to apply different things, they can really get into that. And it may even give you some more employee retention and less turnover, because they feel like they're more a part of what's happening and what's going on as a whole, and that they're maybe more valuable as an employee in doing what they're doing for these biologicals.
Yes, and then The application methods do play into our decisions. So we have this is how bios are usually delivered, is in these bulk containers, which you can sprinkle like cheese graters over your crop, or you can mix together and put into different companies that have different contraptions. BioBest has this little addition that goes on the Makita blowers, so you can just get a Makita blower from Makita or from Home Depot and then buy this little applicator from us, and then it blows it out over your crop. So that's one method. We also have bio boxes or breeder piles. So you can use the bio boxes to hang bios in your crop in specific areas, maybe in hot spots. You can also use them to add food supplements for some of the bios that eat pollen or moth eggs, to kind of get them to breed and then release in your crop that way. Breeder piles are just basically doing that, but on the base of the soil, and that works for most of our soil predators. The sachets are packed with breeder mites usually, and so they can last from 6 to 10 weeks in your crop depending on the environment. They're made of a water resistant material, so they stay protected on the inside, and not everything comes as a sachet. It's really only some of our predatory mites. And then the egg cards over here are a lot of the parasitic wasps. They are, this little thing usually has about 100 eggs on it, and it sometimes comes as parasitized mummies of the pests that they actually eat. So it's kind of cool. But not all products are available in all of the application methods. So it's something that, again, you just have to talk to your rep and your team and decide how much time you have to apply things and what are the preferred methods. So I think we're about 35 minutes into it, and about halfway we're going to get into the specific pests next. And I'm not sure if we have any questions, Kelly, but if we do, maybe we could pause to talk about or take questions about what we've already discussed.
I don't see any questions right now, but it's a good reminder for everybody. Don't be nervous to type your questions into that Zoom chat feature. It's at the bottom of your toolbar down there. But I would say go ahead, Rachel.
Cool. Yeah, if there's no questions up until now, then we can keep going. But yeah, totally send in questions. And if we don't have time to get to everything today, then it'll help us at least decide what we can talk about in the future.
It looks like we just actually got one, Rachel.
Okay, cool.
There is a question that's asking if you have recommendations for a scouting app.
Yeah, well, BioBest has one. So whether you're a customer of BioBest or not, you can pay for that app. It's basically, and our competitors have their own versions of these apps as well. So it's just kind of whoever you get bios from, and maybe you can get a trial of both of the apps and decide which ones you like best. But the BioBest scouting app is called Crop Scanner. We basically make a map of your facility. That's done by people that are smarter than me, but they do that, and then we can insert all of your specific needs, and it's done literally by mapping, and you pull it up and you type in what pests you have. You can upload pictures, and then the nice thing about getting that from your biological provider is that myself as the sales rep and the technical rep can look at that and see what pests you have as well. So it kind of saves you some time in always writing emails and things like that too. So let me know if you guys are interested in trialing that through us, or I'm sure there's other great recommendations out there as well. All right, so if that's the question for now, we'll just go ahead and move on. And we're just going to quickly go over each of these pests and just some of the options so you can start to get familiar. We're not going to get into the specific environments for each bio, and there's even more bio options than are listed, but there's so many nuances that we're going to do an overview, and then like I said, you can request maybe topics for your workshops later, or you can reach out directly and talk about specifics.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that how helpful it is for whatever your bio supplier is, that try to utilize the reps so they can help you out with the program, because they're definitely willing to do that, which may not be the case, you know, if you're just buying some of these other products through a distributor. You know, we all know our salespeople through distributors, and they have a lot of good information. And same with when you get into the biologicals, they are going to help you really decide what products you need and get you started.
Yes, please always ask questions. I always want to know what is going on with my growers, and I know every rep is the same way, and all the companies are, you know, really proud of ourselves for having technical knowledge, and we're all just nerds that want to know everything about this. So if we, you know, can help anyone find a solution, that's our favorite thing to do. So thank you, Marty. Please, yeah, always reach out to your rep. All right, so spider mites. The most common here is two-spotted. As most people know, it's easy to identify because of those two little black spots. The eggs are also easy to identify compared to predatory mites. They're shaped differently, so that gets interesting for scouting. We also have controllers for different types of mites: russet broad, eriophytes, cyclamen, all different types of pest mites. We really want to be scouting for the early damage, which is the stippling on the leaves. The spider mites live underneath the leaves, so anytime you see this, you want to turn over the leaf and you will see them crawling. You do kind of need a hand lens to be able to identify what kind of mite it is. And then you want to look for this webbing. So once it gets to this stage, it's a little too far. These clumps are all spider mites, so I would recommend just hosing that off with water at that point before you apply your bios at the very least. But you can really see the early webbing before it gets to that point, and the webbing that goes in between the leaves and things like that. So with the predatory mites, we have some that are a little more specific to going after spider mites, and then some that are more generalist. So we're going to get into the spider mite ones right now. Starting with the Phytocilus, which only eats two-spotted spider mites. It's very specific. It's needed for outbreaks because it's the only thing that can keep up with how fast those breed when they're in an outbreak. The next one is Cucumaris. It is a little more generalist, so it eats a few types of pest mites, and it survives better at the high temperatures and low humidities that are when mite outbreaks tend to occur in the late summer and early fall. They're great preventative. And then we get to Andersoni, which is the priciest mite, but it's also used at the lowest rate. It survives the longest without food, and it survives the most varying environment. So that's something you always have to consider. It's not always just sticker price when you're looking at bios. You want to decide which one really is the best for your situation, and then weigh the cost on top of that. So the Andersoni, it goes after the most varieties of pest mites as well. So if you have one of those more kind of unique varieties, then you might have to bring Andersoni in. Amblicius is very common, and there's a lot of different species of those, and we're going to touch on more of them later. But I know Marty has experience with making these decisions here. Correct.
Yeah, we've generally used Californicus for more of a preventative measure. And again, they tend to come in when we're starting to warm up a little bit. Humidity's not that high generally for our spring crop in the greenhouse. And I've seen that it's really cool to watch the predatory mites run very quickly. They have the longer legs, and trying to identify those, and again, try to get a spray droplet in where these mites can go. Probably not going to happen. There is some good products out there that you may have used that have residual effect for mites, all these miticides, but again, resistance continues to grow. And when we have had an outbreak, we've gone with the phytocelius, and they're a nice reddish color, even kind of a purplish red, depending what they may be feeding on and the conditions. But I've seen those things just run around and really take out a bad outbreak on some like tropicals that we've had and things like that, when we did start to see a little bit of webbing under the leaves, and they really got some good control, I think, on that. And we've had success with that more so than any of the spraying that we've done. So I've seen that firsthand. When I say spraying, I mean of, traditional miticides and other things like that, try finding, some of them may have some systemic qualities, but I don't think they'll work very good against these like these can if applied correctly.
Totally, yeah. Lots of growers have success with predatory mite programs. So we'll move right on into aphids. There are many different species of aphids. So the first step is to identify what you have. Now that can be very daunting, but again, you can lead on your industry reps for that information. There's lots of great guides online, or I'm sure, your local entomology extension departments would be happy to help with that as well. So lots of options. We have some more generalist predators and then some more specific parasites. So depending on your species, we will decide that combination, but usually it's a combination of both. And then you really want to look for that early damage again, which looks like puncture wounds and bite marks that are different than the stippling from spider mites. This eating and sucking of the sap causes dieback of new leaves, and you can see that sugary sap left behind. So whenever you see those things, you do want to look for aphids that usually live right towards the stem and like where a new leaf or shoot is going to come out. So the more specific parasitoids are the Aphidius aervi that tend to eat the larger species, Aphidius colemanni, which goes after smaller species. As you can see, they look pretty similar. And then the Matricariae and Abdominalis are often a part of those mixes as well. So sometimes when we know exactly what aphid we have, we can use just one of these alone, but often we're using a mix of parasitoids, and we sell them as a mix as well. So it just depends on what you have and your environmental conditions. This is what Marty was talking about earlier, showing people the parasitized aphids. They can get this swelled up kind of goldish, and then also sometimes they look necrotic and kind of black, and they always swell up, and then when you can see the holes when the parasitoid exits as well. So can be really fun for the scouts and the public if you want to use that even as marketing, that you can see that you're kind of letting nature control itself, and then you're really on trend with those consumer desires as well.
Yeah, seeing the mummified aphid is probably one of the most satisfying if you're scouting and just your day-to-day control for aphids. And we know how fast the aphids reproduce, and these wasps can really find them before we can, because they tend to blend in. Aphids are large enough to see, but if we're just walking through, we may not notice right away until the damage has occurred and the generations are going. And seeing the Aphidius fly around and being able to see their flight pattern and where they fly compared to like a fungus gnat is really cool. And you start seeing them all around, and we actually use some different plants to maintain a aphid food source for them, and they just go around and they start multiplying, and it's just really cool to see this and to show I've had so many customers and like their kids or their families come through and community and just think this is really cool, something you can show them visibly, and very satisfying as a grower to see this happening with the aphids.
Totally. Yeah, and then you also have predators. So the Phytolides is a gall midge whose larvae eats the aphids, like in the photo. This is something that you can create an environment for that will breed if you so desire. Now that does require more labor, so it's always a balance for each grower what you want to spend your labor on, but that's a fun one. And then the chrysopa is the green lacewing that most of you have probably already seen as an adult. When you quit doing some of the more harsher chemicals, these will even enter your farm more naturally, and they're really easily identifiable at each of these stages. They're very distinct, so you can scout for all stages. We also do sell it now as an egg, which I just think is really cool because they're way lower price, so they fit into your budget, and then you have them hatching out and working right away as larvae. So yeah, the biological industry is developing as you growers are as well, and we're coming out with some really cool things. Then the last one is one of the most common biological controls, the lady beetle. That one is very distinct as well. At this larval stage, looks like a little alligator, so your team will have fun scouting for those and even catching them eat the aphids like in that photo. And yeah, I love the chrysopa. It's really helped me a lot with multiple pests this year, and like I said, we just came out with that new egg product, so it's just really exciting and does a great job on the aphids. And since it's natural to us here in the Midwest, it's just a great option. So this one is the most kind of complicated, but we'll go through it rather quickly. So I just wanted to show how these develop. So when you have adults laying many eggs at these different temperatures, they're going from egg to pupae rather fast. So you want to be able to control the different life stages, and there's different bios for each stage. So we're going to touch on these in the following slides. You can see that some of them do overlap here, like the aureus that eats multiple stages. And all of these actually will feed on other things other than thrips as well. So just showing how you can really get a 1-2 punch from your thrip program. And the chrysopa work for thrips as well. So I had just a good success story on getting the lowest thrip number in a cut flower greenhouse this year that they really thank the chrysopa for. So just want to add that as a great generalist option. So as I promised, we'll talk about the more amblyceous species, the Cucumeris and the Swirsky. These eat thrips larvae as well as spider mites and whitefly. And Marty has made the decision between these and use them in combination, so I'll just let him touch on that real quick.
Yeah, I have used Cucumeris when it's a little bit cooler early on in the crop, and there may not be as many, they tend to last longer when there's not as many natural food sources, such as the thrip you're trying to control. Swirsky works great when you're starting to have a little bit, or you can supplement with pollen as a food source for those as well. And they're both pretty aggressive, and sometimes early on I tend to sprinkle by hand, but those sachets work really well to put on hanging baskets for one. That allows them to breed in there, and we don't have to take them down or try to spray them or put things through our drip. And then stock plants, when you set them on, you can get a population going with those sachets, and then utilizing some of the hand spreading or, the fan spreading techniques to get these on your crop. The nice thing about these predatory mites is, unlike sprays, whether you're doing it for spider mites or thrip, sprays, you're having to coat most of that leaf surface, the entire plant. To me, it's kind of stressful trying to spray very dense crop and hoping that you got everything to the point of runoff or whatnot. Whereas most of these can just be applied basically just over the top as you're going through, and then, you know, placing the cards strategically around and letting them do their thing. And we've had very good control with especially spring crops like Ipomea and Verbena with our thrip problem on there. Huge reduction with the these two different species, and even better than any of the control we've done with systemics or sprays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these two things are a staple of every bio program, whether you're controlling, I mean, pretty much the only time you wouldn't use them is if literally the only pest you had was spider mites. Then maybe you could get by with using cucumeris. But if you have whitefly or thrip and spider mites, these are just a go-to. So the thrips pupa are controlled by a couple of things. The hypoaspis here is another predatory mite, lives in the soil. The thrips pupa drop down in the soil to pupate. So this goes after that stage. And then the Atheta coriaria is a rove beetle that is extremely aggressive, and another one that's pretty easy to scout for. It's rather distinct at both stages. Both of these things are best applied while the crop is young, like at transplanting. They will reproduce in the soil and follow your crop through all life stages. So if you start early on, these will also help you control against fungus gnat. So that's part of the kind of 1-2 punch. When you use these, which are essential against thrips pupa, you're also preventing fungus gnat. And then thrips adults are controlled by a couple of things. The first one is Aureus, which is another one that's natural to our area in the Midwest. Yesterday when Marty and I were meeting, he had an Aureus actually flying around, landing on his glass. So that was kind of fun and timely. And that just shows how they can enter your farm when you do cut down on the sprays. And we have the right condition for them to reproduce as well. So if you apply Aureus to go after your adult thrips, they also will eat moth eggs. Biomess sells these FSGM moth eggs that help them reproduce. You can use, those are where people get into banker plants, which allow them to breed. So Aureus is just a really fun one, and it is essential to a thrips program. Then finally, we get into the nematodes. So Steinonema feltiae is a nematode. It eats, when it's sprenched, it will go after adult thrips. It gets the pupa in the soil and also fungus gnats. It's basically a feeding tube. So if you get it on the leaves, it will also eat the whitefly larvae that are on the leaves. And nematodes are just, they're a really budget effective product that goes after multiple pests, and it's just, people are seeing crazy good results, and they can be part of the dip as well. So Marty, I don't know if you have anything else to say about any of the specific pests before we kind of wrap up there and get into some questions.
Yeah, all I can say is that Aureus is definitely, aside for just thrip, they're going to go after a lot of different things, and they're very aggressive, and you can kind of breed them in different boxes with, and those moths I think Rachel was talking about, I believe are sterile. Mm-hmm. So you're not getting, you know, they're just a food source. And yeah, the nematodes, huge for fungus gnat on poinsettia crop and getting rid of the thrip that are coming in maybe as part of your drench, or getting rid of that life stage that, you know, your things going on the foliar end is not going to take care of those certain stages. So very easy to apply. You know, you do have to kind of mix them following instructions, keep them agitated, but I don't think that's any different than a lot of our products that need those type of special mixing.
Right, yeah, so, you know, even when we try to get our perfect ecosystem, some things can go wrong, and it will take a few seasons to really get things under control, and even then something new might pop up. So when we need to troubleshoot, we Always look to bios for the first line of defense. So is it something with the environment? Is it rates? Is it reproduction? Do we need to add food supplements? So there's just little things that we can tweak in there with biocontrols before we try biochemicals. Maybe there's a species of thrip that we just can't get under control with bios, so we try a good biochemical and to knock them down, and then we reapply bios with a low REI. We can apply them within a day or 3 days. Occasionally, we do need to use traditional chemistry. When that happens, it's not a total loss. You can use your biocontrol rep to help you wean back off in using biochemicals until we can finally reapply biological controls, or we can use it as a learning experience for next season. So really, it's all about learning. We are all a part of an industry that's developing really quickly in a great way. So if we just work together, then yeah, we can all figure these things out. So I know we've kept you, our presentation's gone about an hour now. So I'll just ask if anyone has any questions. And if you don't want to ask now, or you want it to be more specific, these are our contact information, or you can also reach out through Kelly.
I really, oh, go ahead, Marty.
I just wanted to say that, you know, try these out on a small scale and use, you know, your industry pros that might be doing it already, or your, you know, your reps from the companies, and maybe just try it out and see what you can do. And it is a little scary at first, but like I said, if you can get a little bit of success and at least reduce your spraying. And, you know, in this industry, I think so many of us are willing to share information and help each other out, which is how we continue to grow. And then, you know, which is why College of DuPage has a huge horticulture program happening right now, because of all the interest. And this is going to be the future of, you know, the industry, I think, leaning more towards this. So we need to at least try it out and start educating about it so we can be ready for it.
Thanks, Marty. I really appreciate both you and Rachel sharing your time with us today and sharing your experiences. For those of you who are able to join us, if you have questions or if this sparked an idea that would be maybe a future webinar or a topic for a future workshop, please contact me or a member of our IGIA Growers Committee. We would love to hear from you. And with that, we'll conclude today's webinar. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.